on this election day. The news from ITN, it's 5:40.
From ITN headquarters, the early evening news with John Suchet.
The sun came out and so did the voters on election day 92. It looks like everyone wants a say on this, the closest election for a decade. It's still neck and neck, too close to call for the experts, too close for comfort for the politicians. If the campaign lacked excitement, the result won't. The polls close at 10. Britain has just 4 more hours to make up its mind.
Paddy Ashdown won the race to the polling station at least, voting with his wife Jane shortly after 7 and saying, predictably, he felt on top of the morning.
We call this mist Friday of the morning. It nearly always means a wonderful day. I think it's right. Go around my polling stations, do what I ordinarily do, always on polling day. I always go around and have a look at the local polling stations, say thank you to the returning officers, and then wait with a beating heart for the result this evening.
Neil and Kinnock, voting in his South Wales constituency, also saw signs in the skies to be optimistic.
Oh yes, indeed, and I think that means that we are realistic. The sun is out, so is the Tories, and I think that we're standing in a very good position to win.
He sounds really tired, doesn't he?
In Huntingdon, there were few surprises when John Major was asked which way he'd voted today.
I voted for the party that's going to run the country for the next 5 years.
Feeling lucky?
Feeling lucky, feeling winning.
So what will he be doing come tomorrow morning?
I will be considering the next 5 years and how to run the country.
From early morning, voting across the country was brisk, with the last polls still predicting a neck-and-neck race. But whatever the outcome, this is already a record-breaking election. There are more candidates than ever before, almost 3,000, and more of those are women. And there are more voters than ever before, including more first-time voters, and also this year 30,000 Britons overseas have the vote. It is the closest election for nearly 20 years, and there was a polling day surge in betting on the outcome. The bookies say it's too close even for them to call. But it's the voters who'll determine who enters number 10 tomorrow, and they've got until 10 o'clock tonight to make up their minds.
Live now to our political editor. Mike, it's a fine sunny day over much of the country. Who's that going to favour?
Well, it's supposed to favour Labour, but there's absolutely no evidence that it actually does. And in fact, the early returns from ITN's exit polling, which is going on today, suggest that the turnout is going to be almost exactly what it was last time at 75%.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC's election night coverage. In a few moments' time, the polls will close all over the country, and at 10 o'clock, the start of what could be one of the most dramatic and exciting election nights since the war. At 10 o'clock, we'll bring you our exit poll, our prediction of what we think has happened. But from then on, we'll be out in the country at the counts, actually listening to the declarations, talking to the voters, the winners, the losers. And now our exit poll, based on talking to lots of people as they came out of the polls today in some of the key marginal constituencies. Just like any other poll, it has its range of error one way and the other, but it's just a first indication of the as the night goes on. I won't give it to you till 10 o'clock in case you still want to vote. But here we are, 10 o'clock, and our view is it's going to be a hung parliament. This election is too close to call. We're saying it could be from the Conservatives short by 10 of an overall majority, to Labour, the largest party, and short by 13 of an overall majority, and the likeliest outcome is the Conservatives short by 25, which would leave John Major possibly as Prime Minister, but having to put together, make some arrangements with other parties or rely on other parties not to vote him out. 6 he needs. We're saying at the moment the Conservatives are likely to be short by 25.
John Snow.
Good evening, welcome to ITN's Election 92. What a night. We thought it'd be close, but never quite this close. ITN believes the Conservatives have polled more votes than Labour nationwide, but Labour has performed strongly in Tory-held marginal seats, making the outcome of this election too close to forecast at the moment. Thus, a hung parliament in which no party has an overall majority is highly likely. The BBC is also calling it too close to call tonight. Here are our figures from the ITN Harris exit poll, based on what some 20,000 voters told us as they left polling stations across the country. This is our forecast. Conservative with 41% of the vote share, Labour 37% of the vote share, Liberal Democrat 18%, others 4%. So, our figures put the Conservatives ahead, and the share of vote forecast has been accurate in our polls in the past. But given that our poll also shows Labour doing well enough in the Conservative marginals, we think, to knock out the Tories' overall majority, the result appears very close indeed. And with so many different swings in different areas, we've considered not making any seat forecast. But we thought it important to give you an indication of the kind of way those votes could turn into seats. So, emphasising all those words of caution, here is that example. We suggest that in the new House of Commons, the Conservatives will be short of the 326 seats needed for an overall majority, about 305 seats. That's what we think the Tories will have. Labour will have about 294, the Liberal Democrats will have about 25, and the others, including the Nationalists, 27.
Very expecting crowd in the hall.
As returning officer for the Torbay constituency, I hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate is as follows. Alison Rupert William Simon, the Conservative Party candidate, 28,624. Jones Robert Paul, National Front, 268. Sanders Adrian Mark, Liberal Democrat, 22,837. Thomas Alison Hazel, Natural Law Party, 157. Truscott Dr. Peter, the Labour Party candidate, 5,503. And I hereby declare that Rupert William Simon...
Swing. 1% Great Grimsby, from Labour to Conservatives. Austin Mitchell holds the seat, which is a fairly safe one. Conservatives on a 5% swing. Now this is the kind of seat they needed to sharply reduce the Conservative majority in the Pennines, Pendle in North East Lancashire, and the swing actually 4.5%, call it 5% for rounding up. So there it is, 2,113 majority.
7 vote, the Conservatives no change. Let me take you over now to the swingometer and just show you what's happening over here. There is the result for Basildon. There's David Ames surviving in Basildon, tiny swing of only 1.5%, and there up there is the Pendle result. John Lee, the Conservative, has been defeated by Labour. The swing in Pendle was 5%. So let me just bring up all the other undeclared results and show you the difference between the two. There's the swing, just colouring up only about 12 MPs red. There's the swing in Basildon. That'll be a disaster for Labour. It'll be a triumph for the Conservatives. A big Conservative majority, 60, 70 or so. If the swing in Pendle was typical of 5%, that many more blue MPs would turn red and would be up somewhere to 5% here. Mr Mader's majority would go, we'd be into hung parliament territory. So it's a fascinating battle between these various marginal seats, and we simply don't yet know which is typical. David.
Thank you, Peter. We'll have a look at just some more results that have come in, if we can. Oldham West, Labour hold this mic. Now, Gordon Brown, shadow spokesman for Trade and Industry, joins us from Dunfermline, a safe West Midlands seat, and the swing there, nothing at all, one way or t'other. And Hull East, John Prescott, the transport spokesman, and he gets John Prescott, not much seen during the campaign, one of those who was slightly kept under wraps, as a number of people were.
To our police, our constabulary, for helping us to run this so efficiently, and if I may say, a private but very personal word to those who've worked with me for the last 4 weeks from the police as well, to provide protection, not that it needed it, I don't think, but they've been both good friends and extremely efficient at their job. I'd also like to thank my agent, Nick Speakman, who's now organised 4 elections for me,
And with that, we go to Paddy Ashdown in Yeovil. We're trying to get an interview with him as he leaves his
Important
camp.
role to play, of course, I believe, in the next Parliament. And whatever that will be, I mean, whatever the construction of the next government will be. But it's early days to make predictions that would not yet be borne out by the facts as we see them developing.
Slipping away from Labour, but I'm puzzled by the fact that in the marginal seats Labour are doing rather well. I'm also puzzled by the fact that right across the country, in all the regions I have looked up, the Liberal Democrat vote is falling by minus 2.4 in the south, 6.2 in the Midlands, 4.4 in the north, 2.4 in Greater London, 5 and so on. It's falling all over, and what seems to have happened is that people of a conservative turn of mind who might have deserted to the Liberal Democrats have come back for fear of a Labour government.
Tony King, do you agree with that?
David, it's almost as though there had been divine intervention to try to screw up the tension tonight, because there are three parts of the country where there are a lot of marginals. The northwest, Labour, so far as we can tell, is doing very well in the northwest, should clean up there. The results in the Midlands, however, are extremely patchy.
Well, if he has lost the seat, there will be much commiseration for him among Tories who know that he had a difficult business fighting their campaign as well as holding on to this marginal seat in Bath. The first cabinet minister to go tonight, if he's gone, the first since Shirley Williams to be defeated at a general election.
1992 was as follows. May Joan Barker,
Liberal,
172. 25,000.
Chris Patten has lost this seat.
Duncan McCandless.
Jack Cunningham in Coke.
Christopher Francis Patten.
Conservative.
21,950.
Well, it's written on their faces. Lavender Patten on the left there, Chris Patten's wife, on the left of screen, and Chris Patten exhausted after this campaign and never able to spend more than 3 or 4 hours in the campaigning day. You're looking very sad indeed at the loss of Bath.
I'd like to begin by congratulating Don Foster on his handsome victory. It is a great privilege to represent this city in Parliament, and I'm sure that it's a privilege which Don Foster will enjoy as much as I did.
Kinnock, Neil Gordon,
Labour.
30,000. $30,908.
The Looney candidate.
Such, Lord David.
Looney.
547. Simmons.
Friends, Mr. Acting Returning Officer, and fellow candidates, and my dear constituents, could I first of all thank all the people who've worked so hard. Is that this is the biggest Labour majority in this constituency ever. It is. It represents a 75% share of the vote, and I think it is a testimony to the loyalty of the people of Eastling, and I hope in some way it's a recognition of the standard of service which I've tried to provide in this area for 22 years and will go on providing for all the time. We should say the night is yet young, but so it is in the very nature of this election. What we do know is that we've made gains from Plymouth to Cambridge, through London and several places in the southeast.
For a lot to be said for what John Cole has just said there. How disappointed are you tonight?
Well, in my own constituency, we've increased the Labour vote, and
Well, it's satisfied with that.
the Labour vote went up. What happened is that
Achieved very substantial swings and quite a large number of seats. Indeed, only a moment ago
We think that forecast is now safely to be forecast. Here we have the central forecast then, a majority of 23, which we think is the best the Conservatives could be placed at, and the worst we think they could be placed at now is a majority of 3. So it could be wafer-thin majority of 3, but the likeliest one we think is a Conservative majority of 13.
50 women in the new House of Parliament, House of Commons, many more than...
Rather important point. A political party, if it loses, can change its leaders. Labour's had 4 leaders in the last 20 years. It can change its policies. Labour has radically changed its policies since the 1987 election. What it cannot change, its past. And I think that the problem for the Labour Party is that for the better part of a quarter of a century, it was dominated by the left, it was associated with the loony left, it was associated with the trade unions, with inflation, with strikes, with a winter of discontent, and that the Tories were right all along, it turns out, when they said to themselves that at the last minute an awful lot of voters would say to themselves when they saw the whites of Labour's eyes, we can't have those people in government, it's too risky.
Do you agree with that? The election is that the centre party vote has fallen yet again, but it hasn't fallen enough to help the Labour Party.
Come back to you in a moment. Let's go and get the result from Hampstead and Highgate.
Notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Stephen Nigel Games, the Green Party, 594. Voters Alliance, 44. Glenda May Jackson, the Labour Party candidate, 19,193.
Has taken Hampstead and Highgate. Adds the words MP to the two Oscars she won as an actress. Oliver Letwin there, the Conservative. Campaign. Acknowledging her victory in Hampstead and Highgate.
Firstly, Mr. Mayor, may I thank you, as returning officer and all your staff who have worked so very, very hard, such very, very long hours today, in the way they have conducted the actual count. And could I also thank the police and also Camden's own security officers. I would like to thank my fellow candidate.
Prime Minister waiting with a whole...
Give notice that the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows. Birkhead, Deborah Merrill, 846. Buckethead, Lord, 107. Cockerell, Charles Seaton, 91. Duff, Andrew Nicholas, 9,386. Flanagan, Michael Anthony,
Conservative,
231. Major John,
Conservative,
48,662. Settlement, Hugh Alexander,
Labour,
12,428.
He's been the MP here since 1979. It's quite extraordinary to think that the man who's Prime Minister only came into Parliament with Mrs Thatcher when she was...
It's not yet concluded, but I believe when it is concluded, it will have a satisfactory result, the right government, and we can push ahead with the recovery for Britain that all of us wish to see. Thank you all very much.
Really interested me this evening. I've been glued to the coverage, watching lovely David do his impartial thing, as he all does. Yeah, obviously it's a sad thing that I think the debate didn't really ever get away from kind of trying to answer the vitriol of the press, etc. You might think that sounds like carping, and certainly I don't have any argument with anybody's vote. Everybody casts a vote, and I respect every single one of those. But the reason I'm prepared to talk to you, I'm prepared and you're prepared to talk to me, is that democracy is about debating and discussing. And I do rather feel that the debate was, as always, hijacked by a self-interested media, particularly the press. I do feel that they really should look to themselves and ask whether this kind of pathetic bullying and massive personal abuse and vitriol, is worthy of the great British democracy.
But in the end, in a time of recession, people's houses being repossessed, why do you think the man in the street, when it came to the crunch, didn't vote Labour?
Well, I think the person in the streets obviously did vote Labour in considerable quantities, and many other people in the streets voted Conservative, Liberal, Democrat, which is, of course, their prerogative, and I respect that. But I do, as I say, feel very strongly that democracy is also about information. It's also about having to have something upon which to cast your vote. And having had, for instance, the privilege of being able to hear Neil Kinnock speak on a number of occasions, it is very difficult for me to ever forgive the massive vitriol, the public school bullying that we've seen going on has been quite extraordinary. You're obviously trying to nod me out, but you asked me to leave my beer, so I'll keep on walking.
Ben, thank you for leaving your beer for us. From Millbank, back to you.
Now, that really means then that the other parties put together have no chance of overwhelming a Conservative government, and it leaves the potential that what we saw last night is what we have seen for the last time for 5 years, because a majority of 19 is something, even with deaths and dissensions, can survive quite a few years. So I don't think there's any question of another election at all soon.
A great night for the Conservative Party, for John Major. And above all, a great night for Britain.
Yes. Long corridor that divides number 10, number 11 and number 12 joins them together, and this is the big hallway at the entrance to number 10, where you often see the Prime Minister greeting his foreign guests standing in front of the fireplace.
Time for speeches has been quite sufficient here the last month. I think a speech-free day or so is something I could take fairly easily. And I dare say the whole country could take a day or so without speeches from politicians. And now, in the next few days, they'll have that opportunity. Thank you very much indeed. I've only got one thing to say. It's nice to be back.
This is BBC One. The 6 o'clock news from the BBC with Anna Ford and Andrew Harvey.
John Major is tonight back in Downing Street as Prime Minister as the Conservatives win their 4th victory in a row.
I feel deeply honoured to have been given the opportunity of continuing the work I've started in the last 16 months.
Neil Kinnock will consider his future over the weekend. He said he was sorry for the British people.
They deserve better than they got on the 9th of April 1992.
No breakthrough for the Liberal Democrats, who end up 2 seats worse off.
I believe that our vote would have been very substantially higher had it not been for the fear or the concern people had at the prospect of a Labour government.
Chris Patten, who planned the Conservative campaign, is beaten in Bath.
12,000.
And little success for the Scottish Nationalists as the Deputy Leader loses his seat. The Conservatives have won a 4th consecutive term in office. After a campaign which dwelled heavily on the possibility of a hung parliament, John Major achieved a clear, though reduced, majority of 21 seats and his own mandate. He said he was deeply honoured and that it was nice to be back. He's expected to announce his new cabinet tomorrow. 36 seats. Labour on 271, the Liberal Democrats 20, and others, including Unionists and Nationalists, 24. It means the Tories have lost 34 seats. Labour are up 39, the Liberal Democrats down 2, and the others down 3.
The real story lies in the figures for the share and change in the vote. The Conservatives took 43%. Labour were 8 points behind on 35%. The Liberal Democrats were on 18.
71 seats. The Liberal Democrats are on 20, and the others, Unionists and Nationalists, on 24. The winning post on the government side is 326. The Conservatives make it through with a majority of 21.
Central Office at 5 in the morning, certain of a clear majority. At no point had the opinion polls suggested that with no previous experience of campaigning at this level, he would do as well as Mrs Thatcher at the height of an economic boom. It was a cruel irony that he should celebrate with a defeated party chairman. Mr Patten, the driving force in a controversial campaign, the only cabinet minister to lose his seat. On the stairs, the loudest cheers were for him. There's no doubt that his determination to brand Labour as the party of high taxes played a crucial role in the result. To him, a caretaker Prime Minister.
I'm very pleased with the result. It's a result, I think, that has surprised one or two people, but not the Conservatives.
That it disgraces those who offer it. And she bears it with dignity that makes me proud of her as well as love her very dearly.
Mr Kinnock won his seat with an increased majority, but left the count as much in need of consolation as congratulation. In London, party workers had planned a big celebration. Instead, people huddled together, asking why this had happened and what of the future. Mr Kinnock was promising the party at least wouldn't give up.
The whole country deserves better, and we will work to ensure that the day will come when, with the Labour government, the country will get better in its spirit, in its soul, in its fortune.
By morning, it was back home to West London, and the inevitable question.
Mr Kinnock, any ideas about your future, Mr Kinnock?
It's going to be long and wonderful.
The front door remains tightly shut while Mr Kinnock ponders that future. The party headquarters have issued a statement from Mr Kinnock saying, "I'm consulting with colleagues to inform them of the action I propose to take in the wake of the election defeat. I'll make a full statement on Monday." Most MPs think they know what that means, but only one is actually saying it in public.
I think Neil Kinnock will probably stand down quite soon. I'm not his biggest fan.